For those of you who don't know, for those of you who don't listen, for those of you who are new to the streams, hi, I'm Aweki49. I am your resident techer, your resident goofball, your lewd brother, in a manner of speaking. And for anybody from Sega who ends up watching, I'm a longtime fan since PSO, well, yeah, since just PSO, like back on the GameCube. I wanted the stream to be, well, as the title says, a love letter from a crying friend. And in short, I kind of wanted to start it off with, what is Phantasy Star to us? For those of you who hop into the streams, for those of you who run missions with me, what is this game to you? What is this game to me? Phantasy Star, in a sense, has seemed like a hub where like-minded individuals come together in a space and in a game setting that we all happen to enjoy some aspect of, to an extent where I would say it is a more than casual amount. For those of you who fight with me against the entity that is known as Dark Falls, I call you brother. For those of you that hop in the streams, lightening the mood and making everything just an all-around better experience, I call you homie and friend. And for those of you who are in the Alliance supplement that I'm currently in, that I've run missions with, your comrade. In the past, Phantasy Star used to be an outlet of extra time after high school, after I was done with classes, homework, yada yada yada. It was a place to unwind. It was a hub where I ended up meeting some of my closest friends to this very day. And that number keeps growing with all of you that I end up meeting in stream. And I'm sure on YouTube at some point. Swagala, this is pretty much out to you, homie. Good work lately, man. I enjoy the stuff you're putting out. But I want to also highlight some of the things that kept us playing. Even for some of us who had low funds, especially back in the day for Phantasy Star Universe. A subscription service, not a lot of us were making money. I was making minimum wage. So funds had to be spread out sparingly. So even though this was a constant expense, what kept you coming back for more? Was it the amazing fashion? Yes. Yes. Especially for that time, characters looked amazing. The character customization isn't anywhere near what it is right now in Pso2ngs, but for the time being, it was fantastic. Self-insert yourself into a high fantasy sci-fi world and play with those who are doing the same. Was it the combat? Combat for the time being action combat. Resource management wasn't a terrible thing. Player markets were completely player controlled, at least for the most part. And the story that gave you a reason to fight. Even in NGS, we know that Dark Falls is, the ultimate bad that we were supposed to fight. But there was everyone you met along the way. Maya Shido, if we're talking about Phantasy Star Universe. If we're talking more PSO2 base, so many great characters. Personal favorite of mine, Phalig. You had reasons to like the heroes and the villains of the game. Everybody who was a class rep for your given class, you found solidarity in someone who personified your gameplay style. For those of you who like Kyokuya, like me, for a Phantom main, Edge Boy incarnate. For those of you who liked Barbara for Fighter. For those of you who loved Matoi as your Force representative, pretty much. There was a lot to love in terms of character, combat, player market, and high fashion. It was a melding pot of different systems which culminated into a fantastic game. A storyline that would keep you hooked, amazing fast reactive combat that would always give you a ceiling to do better. Constant progression. You were able to at least roadmap in your head a way to get stronger if you felt you were too weak, if you felt that you weren't doing enough. And easily accessible content where you were able to hop in with a new friend, forge a new bond. All of these worked in tandem to go on and create an amazing space for things to grow. But I'm not going to say the game was perfect. The game did come with its flaws. In terms of the progression standpoint, invasive microtransactions to go on and kind of just interrupt the flow and immersion of gameplay. I'm speaking of mining nodes, fishing spots. The more you wanted to do the game system, the more you were nickeled and dimed to continue that game system, the whole progression. Many would say AC scratches, but honestly, for the time being, I never found that an issue in base, because you always had a game. AC was kind of that extra. Well, on the lines of AC scratches, I would figure it was a twofold system. One, it was an extra way for Sega to generously make monetization, to make money, while not interrupting in the gameplay systems within the player market. It was something that was actually seamlessly, for the most part, integrated in. It was more of a player's way to continue to support Sega for a great product that they put out, where that was a side system just for players who really appreciated the product that they got. They were able to contribute. It now seems more of a forefront. It seems like it is the only means of monetization. It's not as if you were given a great game. It's more of the focus of, hey, we have really cool fashion. If you're playing a Type 2 character, please give us your money so we can make more of this. Where base PSO2 AC was like the hot fudge on top of a sundae. You were able to do cool things, and now you were able to look cool while doing it. It's been flipped to where gameplay seems to have taken a back seat, and they want you to instead just focus on looking cool. We're missing substances for this game which keep people playing, especially come Kavaris. Kavaris was supposed to be the major turning point for a lot of players in terms of giving them a reason to continue to play. And I have to say, the offerings seem to be so slowly drip fed. I guess an analogy that would kind of encapsulate it would be a faucet that was forgottenly left slightly ajar. And ever so slightly, you had that slow midnight drip from where you thought you turned on the faucet, that thing that'll constantly keep you up at night, as if it's the only sound in the house. In terms of progression, I would like to ask everybody, what do we have? And it's a twofold question, right? In terms of a means of wanting to get stronger, what's the reason for acquiring gear? And then what gear do we have to really acquire? In terms of 6 stars, which are relatively easy for the general populace to go in and obtain, especially if you're not trying to min-max, you have a myriad of armor sets which kind of fill out the base flow of what you would like. You can either go high berserker damage, you can go slightly more defensive while still adding on damage to yourself with the Pso2ngs units. So filling out those and filling out your augments for them, whether you choose to buy them off the player market or if you choose to go on and do everything from scratch, you have those means. As a free-to-play player, everything's drawn out, you're more focused on farming, you have to accumulate all of your resources, and then just you have a 3-day window to hopefully sell en masse to get enough to go on and make money in order to purchase whatever else you were probably missing that farming didn't necessarily give you. As a premium player, just shell out that $15 a month. Give Sega consistent revenue, guaranteed revenue, as it were, in a manner of speaking. You alleviate this road stop. They sell you the cure for an otherwise very inconvenient system in the game. As someone given their previous title, PSU, I understand that everything was tied to a subscription service and your access to the player market was pretty much given off of that. But even if we go a game further into base PSO2, even though you had Mission Pass access from the Mission Pass in terms of shop tickets, you at least were rewarded for playing more with a chance to have more access into the player market. It allowed you to access one of the most important parts of any MMO, at least in my opinion, which is the player economy. The constant ebb and flow of a player market is probably one of the most integral parts into a game because it ties in with progression in some manner, especially given in this day and age where a lot of things are based off of RNG. And RNG, as we all know, as consistent players of the game, RNG is not your best friend. It can be a nice, wonderful surprise at times, certainly, but it is definitely not your best friend. So you will need other ways to... It seems you'll need other ways to go on and guarantee what you need. But given the fact that we have our 7 stars, and only one bit of those 7 stars can be sold on the player market, being the rugged series for weapons, I'm skipping ahead. We've gone over armor, but let's go over weapons. We have 2 rarities that were released during Kavaris. 6 stars and 7 stars. 6 stars, again, if you're not trying to min-max, it's relatively easy to achieve. You got your rocks, you have your Sectal series, and then you have the Evil Eclipse and Evil Bit weapon series. Pick your flavor of weapon, pick your aesthetic, pick your fixes that fit within your budget. They're easy to achieve. However, once it comes to 7 stars, which overall make farming easier, which is your part in combat, it's very, very hard to go on and achieve that. Super hard to achieve that. You either have to sit there with a really, really long list or pray to RNGesus, or integrate with the player market where these things are so rare, their prices aren't realistic for most players trying to obtain these things. Even at a quick glance, if we look for a rugged sword, 250 mil, and there's only one on the market. Is it a fixed up? they went budget.
No! God, please, no!
They went budget a fix. So this isn't even min-max, and they were asking the top dollar.
Oh! Ew! Dude! What the f—
I would say probably less than 1% of players have the funds to go on and purchase that. This is an exclusive weapon for the whales. I understand because I am one. Was one. I still am one. But this brings me into my next point, and what Sega is asking for the price of monetization. We are now at a year's time where NGS has been released. And anybody who is a part of Sega can look up this account, look how much I've spent. I believe I definitely categorize as a whale to at least a mid-tier or lower high-tier whale. Anybody who's watched the streams, you've all seen the amount of scratches I've done. In-game money isn't necessarily a problem for me to obtain, but even as someone who's waited a year out, even I have been asking myself over the past few months, why do I continue to play and why do I continue to spend on this game? What has the game given me as a customer now? Not only as a fan, but as a customer. Why do they deserve continuous cash flow from my wallet through my blood, sweat, and tears from my IRL job? Is it worth the cash that I'm putting out? What am I receiving from the developers? What are some things that I wish for in this latest installment of this franchise that is not being fulfilled by the development team? I want to start this off with probably one of the most important things that should have been at launch, and that's a coherent story. We are now at our third region, and I want to ask, what do we know about this region so far? We know that there's an entity called Dark Falls. He resurrects every 1,000 years. Our player character has been brought from base 1,000 years in the future to go on and combat this threat. Coincidentally, the second he rises up, the second we're here, it's a seed that plants itself. We have a few characters that we have been introduced to, the major ones being apparently Daddy Garoa, Aina, Manon, and then given the latest region, the sibling, quintuplet or whatever. Which cutscene wise, they've all have their little quirks. They all have their things that we can at least self-insert that we like about them. But motivations, conflicts, knowledge of the enemy. Besides us getting attacked by the enemy, why do we hate Dark Falls? In terms of subtext, the only things you slightly get is you get Dark Falls attacking Aleo City and bringing that to ruin. Thus, Garoa's disappeared and we have no clue where he's been. With Redum, you have Renus Retem. He's terrorized the main city, and that's it. Granted, they say thousands have died, but that's more of telling us, not showing us. We are there to solve the conflict, but we haven't seen the consequences of that conflict. We haven't been attached to a character, and then we've suffered loss. We have a character that we all, I would say, the general populace of the community likes in Nadara. Amazing voice, 2 cool songs. A little disappointing that she's not in any way involved in Kavaris at all, for us to get to like her more. So she's becoming more and more forgettable as time passes, and she's been replaced with the new set of characters, the scientists that kind of govern Kavaris. But even their introduction, their conflicts, their motivations have been suddenly halted, and we've had no real update, no real distraction besides the anniversary event to kind of tide us over. Right now, this is just an acquisition for cosmetics. Nothing ties in with the ancient enemies, the newest introduction to enemy types that we have in the game. And it becomes a slow churn in terms of what is still fun to play about this. Given the fact that I came over here, I want to just give out an example. And I want to give out the solution that has been made, not with Sega's hand, but with the community. Our latest terms of progression has been the Kaiser weapon series in order to circumvent RNG. Again, we have 2 7-stars that have been introduced into this new region, the Rugged series and the Kaiser series. You can either hope on and praying with RNGesus that you would have one of those drop for you, or you can go through the long, arduous slog of obtaining every single bit of material to obtain your 7-star here in order to pad out your playtime. It's not a fun grind, because it doesn't even capitalize on one of the more satisfying aspects of this game, which would be the combat. Instead, to get your rocks weapon, if we're going to gamify the system here, the easiest way is to just obtain a cheap one off the player market, upgrade it to 50, and you have your first piece of the armor. You have your first piece in order to get this new weapon. A little caveat with this though, you can't use one that you've affixed, or it's not within your best interest to use one that you've fully affixed, because none of the traits, either fixa and or augments that you've put on the weapon, transfer. And the reason I say this is to artificially pad out your playtime is because you have to spend more resources in order to get it up to the efficiency that you had with your previous rocks weapon. You have to grind it back up to 50, as well as the fact that you have to re-augment it, so that's more money or more time out of your day to go on and either farm up the augments, again praying on RNG that you get the correct augments that you had, or circumvent whatever augments you didn't get with your time farming by interacting with the player market, hoping to have enough funds to go on and re-augment everything to the standard that you had it with your 6-star. And that's just one aspect of getting the 7-star weapon. Sega, I believe, they've taken a bet on player faith, and their funds are running dry. Ice cubes, where can we get those? Ice cubes you get from farming ancient enemies, but it's not as simple as hopping into a combat zone. No. You need cold weather protection, because as you are in that Rayard Gorge, you're constantly hit with damage over time, unless you give yourself cold resistance. And what does cold resistance consist of, might you ask? Well, I'll tell you. It's either you need an augment, cold standard, but just putting a normal cold standard doesn't seem efficient. Why would you put that on your armor? Can you get this through, what is it, the treasure shop? You can. It's RNG again, and then it still costs either, I believe it's SG in order to obtain this. I could be wrong. But what would seem more efficient? You want the damage with it. Well, what does that entail? You need a cold standard 3. You need 5 of the Gigas augments. So you either hopefully have gotten that through Gigas farming, or more likely you've integrated with the player market, thus depleting your funds on the Seta even more. And then what's that? You need 100 icicle orbs. Hey, yo, that's crazy. And that's a perfect segue into our next point for the 7-star, icicle orbs. Where can you get these? Seeing as how you need 900 in order to make one weapon that doesn't take any of your fixes and doesn't transfer any fixes. You get them by farming trials, usually in South Kavaris, and it's not by killing enemies, even though you can for a very slight chance, but you're more likely to get them from breaking a ton of boxes. I'm just up here breaking boxes, worry not about me. And you get 1 or 2 per box. Hopefully you get 2 per box. Not likely. So you have to probably break around like, what, upwards of 800 something boxes in order to get everything for one weapon. Trials are RNG. So what has the community done? They've tried to gamify the system and circumvent this slow churn of obtaining even this. As a working adult, I rarely have the time to go on and obtain these. How many do I have? Out of curiosity. I'm at 233. I'm working adult with a full-time job. And I'm having a hard time obtaining these. It's 900, dude. That's too big of an ask. Like, there hasn't, even in base, if we are using this as if we're using that as a comparison, which I don't know why I know why, but I don't know who okayed the decision to go on and try to pad out time so much to where the number decided was 900. I think the most we've seen has been with the high endgame set at the end of episode 6 being your light weave armor pieces, and that was 150 of the boss materials, which were easy to get off the player market. You can't sell these on the player market. Your only way is to break boxes. It's not even like, hey, someone who's decided to farm, like what used to happen in base, you were able to sell armor piece materials on the player market. It gave the farmers an easier access to funds, and it gave those who don't have enough time, who had the in-game money, to go on and purchase it. That way they still had a road to progression that seemed reasonable. Even if there was as big of an ask as 900, there was an easier and more coherent way to obtain those materials. Right now it's just ludicrous. It's only farming. It's only farming. And that's just to pad out playtime. We need active players. We need to make these metrics look better. And I have to say, there are a lot of times where I'm on stream, and there are a lot of times with those who hop into my stream, those who used to be consistent viewers, they don't consider this loop fun. Blizzardium. Oh, Blizzardium. Let's get on with this. I believe the means for obtaining Blizzardium, this crazy resource, granted the number's 150, it seems reasonable, but what's behind that? In order to obtain Blizzardium, you either have to exchange materials that you've hopefully been playing since the beginning of the game to have a decent amount to obtain up to 20 a week. I've got 7 hours remaining until reset in order to obtain this next 20. But it's taking monotite, dualamite, which monotite has kind of been phased out. So there's a use for this as long as you were someone who played from the beginning and you've amassed a decent quantity of them. Dualamite, trinite, and definitely tetracite are still being used. So these are all diminishing resources that are taken up by other systems that hopefully you have farmed enough of. So what is a day in a serious player look like? Mineral farming as much as you can, which means scouring the open world constantly just to obtain your minerals, and then you have to room hop and farm trials in order to obtain your orbs and hopefully Blizzardium, because outside of your some of your guaranteed methods being ones that require minerals, you have one on top of a mountain per day, and then hopefully you get lucky in your treasure shop pulls in order to get more. If not for this event, I wouldn't have even had over 100. Because at least then it brings it to a moderately decent farm point, but you're capped. You can only obtain 20 per reset. Let's see how many I can obtain from this guy if that well even replenished. Which I hope it did. Because if not, it just seems like a bigger slap. Nope, it did not refresh. Hopefully it refreshes tomorrow. Otherwise, I'm going to be insanely upset. Because now my progression's been forcibly halted. I'm playing the game, I'm playing it the way I want to, but I can't obtain the thing I want to through gameplay, through organic gameplay. I think Sega has been putting their hand way too much in how people progress, instead of giving players who have different play styles, different things they like, different aspects they like about the game, different avenues of obtaining the thing that they want to obtain. So along with the in-game economy not being the best right now we go with the second pillar of MMOs that I find insanely important: progression. We've talked about it a bit. But progression takes many forms. It's in making your numbers, it's in making your attacks and defenses go higher, as well as overall fashion. Again, characters want to look cool while doing cool shit. And this is an aspect I think Sega, in a manner of speaking, as long as you're willing to open up your wallet for the most part or spend an egregious amount of grinding, I would say that at least the offering that they put into the game, despite how you are able to obtain it in the game, they've done a relatively good job. I'm pretty sure everybody that is watching this stream right now can agree that the character creator and the amount of customization that you have in this game is pretty much second to none. And I will die on that hill if there's anybody trying to fight me for that. But I don't think I'll die. I think I'll win. Even compared to a lot of other Korean MMOs, where their main draw is how good their characters look. But I speak of it in an aspect that you can make whatever the you want to make for the most part, as long as it's within terms of service. Let's be reasonable here. We're all adults for the most part. Come on. Like, given this alone, this is just a normal set that I was able to colorize it the way I wanted to. I was able to put on whatever accessories. Granted, however, the accessories are limited. One of the changes I would love to see for this game, if in order to make premium a bit more worth it, I got yelled at in Chrono's stream for this by Chrono, because he said it wasn't enough. But I understand it's not enough, but it's just one more peg to make premium more worth it, is the fact that you're really limited on augment slots. I mean, you're limited on accessory slots, especially since they compiled a point system. We all thought it was really cool when you just had more slots, but everything costs the set amount of points now. So it kind of defeats the point of putting in additional slots for your accessories. Premium should get double the amount of points. I'm pretty sure a lot of people love dressing their character. That would be a decent sell for them right there. But along with looking cool, that's just on the fashion aspect. Now we have to talk on the weapon aspect. We can all admit that this game has a myriad of amazing weapon camos. You can get let's say you love the stats of your weapon, but you hate how it looks. How do you circumvent that? Oh, they've already created it. Amazing weapon camos. Pretty much going for any ray that you can think of. You want something more mystically oriented, you want something more realistic, and anything in between. They've got you covered. But now, how do you obtain these? And this is one of the biggest slaps. For the most part, it's in base. However, in base, they've solved this issue for the most part. You find them by doing missions. You go in with like-minded people, you farm up, you have a good time where you can either get weapon progression, augment progression, and or you can get that really cool cosmetic that you've wanted. And not only do you have your stats up from that, it's a nice trophy that you can show off to everybody who happens to be on looking onto your character, igniting that fire to go on and do the same. It's a domino effect. And you'll see that a lot of these weapon camos I have set, they're all from base. NGS, what weapon camos do we have? Let's take another wonderful look at this player market. And again, mind you, the game's been out for a year. This is from and obtainable through the AC Scratch. This is a revival scratch. This is a revival scratch. Really cool camo, by the way. Revival scratch and the past scratch. Recent scratch. Revival scratch. They're just giving you the things that were back in base to go on and make a buck off you. They've coded it to where it's sellable in NGS. So the only ways to obtain it were you either have to deal with the inflated kind of debt. I wouldn't say dead necessarily, but not as many people integrate with the base PSO2 marketplace as they used to before NGS's release. So you have a ton of players like me. I still engage in it now and then, but not so much anymore because I've pretty much got what I want from the base market. So you have a ton of things that are outrageously priced by the standards of most people. So you either have to integrate with that or shell out money to Sega to have a chance at getting the thing you want. Sure, there's gotcha fail-safes. If you spend a certain amount of money, you get a ticket to kind of pick out what you want from the prize pool. Or hopefully you end up drawing what you want. But all this involves you giving money to Sega. But you're still spending time in the game. Where does your time come into play? They want you, it almost seems like they just want you spending money and then your time. They've got your money. Every aspect that's been added into NGS feels like they want to move towards that. And I hate that. You should hate that. You should want to play a game that's fun to play. Maybe you're a hardcore gamer. Maybe you were like me a year ago, where you love the challenge of a game. What are the rewards for your challenge? What are some high-end content that you, right now, could partake in? I will say the offerings aren't much. You have Darkfalls R2, and in order to even integrate with that, you need to be part of an alliance, but you can start your own, right? That's not that big of a deal. And alliance bounties, they're not hard to complete for the most part. But now, what do you get as a reward for doing the game's most difficult content? Nothing that you couldn't obtain from just bolting around in a normal combat zone. Not even a chance at a 7-star weapon, the coveted thing that people would presume should be a drop from the game's most difficult form of content. Not a cool weapon skin to look cool. So it kills it on the fashion front. It kills it on the power front. It's challenge for the sake of challenge's sake, and that's probably the weakest form that they could have introduced, especially since they control the loot pool. Everything that's implemented doesn't make sense. It's like, and as with any other game company that makes a misstep, you always hear the words, "We're listening. We hear you." But they only hear you for what they want to hear you for, it seems. How? Again, within a year, even the most recent scratches, they would rather, I mean, at least with this one, you can obtain it in game, right? You obtain it with tickets that you get for playing the game. But is it fun to play the game? The new limited thing, I haven't tried it yet. I want to on stream. I will hopefully do it on my days off, which will be Thursday and Friday now, since I've swapped apartments. And I finally got to start my first day yesterday. So I would love to do that with all of you. A boss rush seems fun. But all the things that you have from this ticket are all from base. So if you're a base player and you had a majority of these, besides, like, what do you get from all this? This was an old weapon series. It was a cool weapon series. We got the skin for it. That's good. This was a pretty cool one, but why not give us the Jutus? We have the Atlas. Why not give us the Jutus, the shinier form of this? It'll look way cooler. Literally, why? Pso2ngs. kind of weak. It looks okay here as a sword, but there are way cooler weapons that they could have introduced. This is just a meme. I'm okay with them making joke weapons and joke skins. Those are fun. So right now from this scratch, the most coveted things, and if you were a base player, you don't want any of the codeds. It's good that they made it all in the one weapon skin. Back in base, they would drip feed you every skin, so it would just crowd up your inventory. Bad move. It's a good thing that they're giving it to you in one skin. I'm just upset it took so long. Why didn't they like create some sort of exchange where if you had it, or you can exchange materials to supplement what you didn't have as a skin to get this prior? That part doesn't make sense. A lot of this doesn't make sense. That's my biggest complaint. All the introductions seem kind of like a duct tape. Oh, maybe they want this. Give it to him. Just chuck it without a second thought. We gave you the thing. Take the thing. Please play our game. Like, I would say probably the coolest bit was the Evlita series that we have. Everything else you probably should have obtained already if you were a base player. And a lot of the core audience that they were trying to get, which was a lot of casual players, this doesn't have a substantial amount of content to keep casual players engaged, especially if they're trying to go the free-to-play route. Everything just seems abusive at that point, where you're 1 second away from opening your wallet until you realize that this is stupid and decide not to. Like, and again, let me just list off Sega's strengths that keep me, as someone who I was definitely way more hardcore a year ago, and I've definitely limited my playtime just because there are other games that are doing better that warrant more of my time when I have the free time to play. I'm still a fan of this game. If I wasn't, I wouldn't even be doing the stream. I wouldn't release this on YouTube whenever the stream's done, just so more can kind of resonate and see if more resonate with this view, because I see a ton of the other top streamers do it, but they kind of just graze the surface, at least on that platform. Probably in stream they might have done it, I don't know. I'm a busy man. So, but at most, what do you want from the scratch for playing the seasonal content? Did you miss out on these? They were available on SG, but they were in a different spec, and the only difference between the two is you get to move your fingers, and you get to, yeah, you just move your fingers, and you get to go into the new body type because you get to move your fingers. It's cool that they give you like base Matoi stuff though. This is awesome. This is really good. My character has tits now. But it seems like they're clawing on the heartstrings of people who've already played base instead of going for the casual audience, which they initially kind of made a lot of the major changes to this game in order to accommodate. But in that same breath, they frustrated the absolute f*** out of the people who would still continue to play this game, but are still requesting money and time and effort from those players. It's a slap in the face, but for what payoff? Even the quality of their boss fights, which used to be some of the most... In base PSO2, I don't think there was a boss fight that didn't either seem unique or that I didn't insanely like. For those of you who have watched me during my mixer days or have played with me personally, you know I love a good boss fight. You know I love a good combat interaction. That shit alone will be a good reason for me to play, just to see what I can do. Just lights the fire that makes you want to play more, to have a good time. Who remembers the Persona fight? Even the Phallic fight? I love the Phallic fight. Better to play it at 60 FPS, so you need a decent machine to run it. 30 FPS, I damn near consider unplayable, especially for the second phase, for the general audience. Masquerade, one of my favorite fights where I consider it is the benchmark for you learning your class in base PSO2. Deus Eska, Mother, Dark Falls freaking Elder. There were so many good iconic fights. All of them have a strength that they each represent. Where is that here in NGS? Where? And it wasn't just the fight themselves, the choreography. Your enemy spoke. They gave you audio cues, so it was a sensory experience to fight. That's where the Phalig one fell off a little bit. It was definitely a lot more about paying attention to her tells as opposed to auditorially listening, so they kind of broke a little bit in that. But even then, they gave you enough to where it was still a fun fight, and you still got both sensory. You still had to pay attention with both of those senses, looking and hearing. But for pretty much, I would say 96% of the boss fights, everything melded together in terms of a visual and auditory experience. And then it was up to you, the player. You had the responsibility of making your class and reacting to the fight in the manner that allowed you to survive and do the most damage that you possibly could. It was a wonderful marriage of what the developer put out versus what the player was willing to put in. You don't have that in NGS. No boss speaks. No boss does so much as a grunt. Everything is you have to pay attention. But it's repetitious. It's over and over to where you have to constantly sit there, burn your retinas, make sure to pay attention to those tells. It almost feels like at times, granted, Sega's always had a strength in music. The music, top notch, sounds good. But audio design for a boss leaves a lot to be desired. And this goes in hand with what they've put out for a story. It just seems like they spout exposition at you, and then they just throw a new enemy at you. Why do I give a fuck about this enemy? Why do I care about the new Dark Falls? Why? Besides the fact that he is Dark Falls, and the representation for Dark Falls was literally the best in the series up to date. Even by the end of episode 6, I didn't fanboy over Shiva like a lot of the community. Phalig's still number one. But I understood Shiva's motivations. I liked her as a character. Design-wise, thought she was really cool. And her aesthetic was solely unique. And she was touted as the big bad, the profound darkness, true profound darkness. And even her progressions into TBD was a drastic change, a drastic fight mechanic change, a different auditory experience, and in a different set piece. I understand that Sega is in damage control right now. We all understand this as consistent players. But this has to be a lesson to not rush out a product that you have to damage control probably for twice as long as you would have if you just released everything when you were ready. And it's not as if they didn't have a lot of content that they could have given global. In the meantime, this is me being selfish as a global player, right? I understand Japanese-based PSO2 got a lot the West did. So their home audience probably would have suffered for a bit. I got that. There are certain things, I ended up seeing the tweet today where someone actually compiled a list of the things that base got, well, that global got, and that Japan didn't, and vice versa. They could have sent, I would say, a decent sized team just to make sure everything rolled out when it was supposed to. That way, everything can be on parity, both servers can be on parity with each other, and then they have that general size team to go on and work on the things that NGS needed to work on. Because a lot of it is damage control. I know that certain content creators would say they're glad that NGS released when it did. That way Sega can hear these concerns. But I think that a lot of it, there's no way, if they were properly playtesting, if they were properly internally talking about it, that there's no way that a lot of these issues weren't discussed. It just seems like the dev team's more or less at the beck and call of higher ups, and that's generally the way it is at a different company. But I'm almost of the mindset, waiting a year out, that if NGS has to burn in order for me to eventually get the game I want, I'm okay with it burning. And that's a sad state to have for this very beloved franchise that I've been in for over a decade. That's a lot of my childhood. That's a lot of my early adult years. And I am now coming to peace with it kind of crashing and burning, because either one of two things will happen. I either get the game I want to play, or my time and my money and my effort can be spent elsewhere. There is no reason that me, that anybody else interested in this franchise, either you working at Sega as doing some other part, not necessarily part of the development team, or us as fans of the series, should have to sit there, constantly shell out money, and wait for a subpar product. I shouldn't have to wait, given their content schedule, another 6 months in order to hopefully maybe slightly get a crumb of conceivable story to know why I give a fuck about the game that I'm in. How is it that we're a year out? I have no knowledge of the dolls, for the most part. I have no knowledge of my said companions that I'm supposed to be with. I have no reason to care about the characters. The only reason I even initially care is because they brought my character, which carries all of its old cosmetic progression, into NGS. But now also the trend has gone on where I'm being resold the things that I purchased in base. You're being sold in a way, shape, or form. If you're not paying with money, you're definitely paying with your time for things that you probably have already obtained in base. There's nothing new. They're just shelling out a lot of the old stuff, which, in a sense, if we had a coherent game with meaningful progression and fun content to play, either horizontal, other forms of progression, and/or even side things you could do in the meantime to wind down after you've had your fun bit of content. None of that exists unless you hop into base. Alliances, they wanted to bring on and put on a bit more of a show for them, right? You have your alliance badges, they had alliance campaigns. Where's our meetup spot? Still in base. One of the major things that PSU and base PSO2 had a very strong thing of is in personalizing personal quarters and gathering spaces. There's none of that in NGS, but that gave acquisition of those items gave meaning to do all the other forms of content in the game, because all of it was tied to missions that were in the game. You spent your time, and the spoils that you got from those battles, you could spend however you wanted. Either customize the space that you wanted or use and sell as currency to go on and get the things that you wanted, either weapons, armor, or other room items, or other cosmetics that you saw fit. Your time and the rewards for those times were spent out however the player decided to divvy that up. You were more in control of what you wanted to do with the results and the spoils of your time. That was Sega back in the day, in a sense, respecting your time, and you have none of that come NGS. For those of you who are free farmers, free-to-play players, you're a very important aspect of this game. No matter how others would probably say it otherwise, you are the farmers. You're the ones who populate the player markets with materials that I, as a whale, do not have the time to acquire. And thus, I rely on you to be in competition with each other to go on and set players like me the best prices possible. I inject you with the in-game currency that you need to go on and acquire other things that RNGesus has not blessed you with, being it either armor, weapons, and hopefully sometime in the very, very near future, cosmetics that can be obtained in game without you needing to open up your wallet for a thing, or minimally so. I would even say the ask for premium, the price itself, isn't bad. But for the most part, other than having access to the player market, why would you want it? The player market in terms of effectiveness isn't anywhere near as smooth as it was in base. What do I mean by that? Let's give one of the main reasons for how I ended up making a lot of money in base aside from AC scratching. Outside of that, a lot of it was fixing for weapons. Selling weapons into a smaller subset armor. And this is where this goes to burn for the most part. Weapons for the most part are useless. If not for the Rock series being used as a material for the Kaiser, and if not for Braver being a popular class to play, this would probably follow the trend of Aleo and Redem, where these would probably be the lowest price on base if they weren't constantly being used up and recycled out of the player market. Those without fixes are sold at a lowest price that they possibly can to be sold. Anything with a fixa, I mean, we see the price go up here, but you only have one page. There's no competition for these because these are constantly being used up. Like, there's no use in really multi-weaponing it. This is someone's leftovers, and the affixes on it would be cool if they progressed over. So this for 15 mil? I'm not gonna lie to you, no one's gonna buy that. People are going to buy the cheapest one if they choose to use a Rocks weapon, and they'll just affix it with whatever BS they would do, because they're gonna gamify the system. They know that the Rocks weapon doesn't have a long shelf life. And this is just for the katana. If I look for, let's see, Rod's a decently popular class. Do we have another Rocks up here? Let's look with Sectal. Sectal isn't nearly as popular as the Rocks, solely due to its effect. It's sold for 10k. You kill a few enemies and you have enough to progress your way into a 6-star weapon. My oh my. This is your free-to-play experience. If you want to go into fixes for this, which I don't know why you would for the most part. You see for certain ones you already hop into 8. You go up to almost a mil. But again, your funds as a free-to-play player, due to your forcibly restricted access to the player market, severely diminished. This is probably a good chunk of your savings right now. And even as a premium player, if you decide to make that one purchase in order to be a premium player, it's not like you get a lot for it. You get access to spend more money on certain things. Like you get more access to go on and spend in the treasure shop. You get a free pull. I have no Blizzardium. There's a cool bit of emblems and stuff that I could buy for in-game money. That's cosmetic. I didn't have to farm this out, but it's another way for them to kind of introduce it in. If I spend my free pull, do I get Blizzardium? No. But I'm a premium player. I get another spin at this, right? What else do I get? Hopefully some Blizzardium. Oh, hey, no Blizzardium. But holy shit, yo, I could get some Monotite though, even though I already have 800. Yo, I'm limited on 5 that I could purchase with in-game funds. Go out and farm. Apparently, I'm a ass scrub. Photon scales. I never upgraded my Synchron weapon to its 4th stage, so I didn't have to spend that 600 photon scales. But other than that, why would I buy photon scales? They're not useful in game right now. Let's look at the SG one. Hey, you know what I can get? An NX cube. Like, look, someone wanted to make a thicky modern chick, and she looks fantastic. I say she because I don't know the gender of this. Probably a good majority of these people are dudes, but who cares? People are able to make the vision of the character that they want. This is Sega's strength, and they are definitely underutilizing this. Someone wanted to do a Sailor Venus cosplay. It looks fantastic. This, like, there is so much untapped potential that Sega keeps normally the term is shitting the bed. Alright, just to wrap this up so I have enough time to eat. But thanks everybody, first off, for showing up. Like, again, like one of the pillars I personally ended up enjoying the game is for the people I end up meeting in the game, interacting with, having fun, doing missions with, talking to. So part of the reason I do this a lot of the times is just because you guys are here. Thank you everybody for hopping in, truly. Tomorrow's stream I should be a bit less negative. I wanted it to be constructive, but a lot of it is just, if again on the off chance that someone from Sega ends up watching this even for a millisecond, it's just see the fan outcries from someone who's not a major content creator, but to see that if they're lost on where they need to go, I want them to know that they had the tools prior. Yo, again, like, look at this. Someone just felt, hey, I want to use stealth and camo. I want people to know that I like double sabers. Someone just decided to do this with the AIS sabers. The amount of self-expression here is already good. They just need to capitalize on like this. Create cosmetics as a side thing. If you make a good game, people will willingly spend their money. You give them the option, they will. If you try to force it, people will feel more hamstringed. It's basically it. Come on. These shouldn't be hard lessons to learn, but I understand that, like, Japan business execs are a lot more antiquated in their ways. But yeah, I will see everybody later. I gotta eat. Love you all. Bye.
Complete.